Hey guys, this is Mark Goldberg from Marc Vlogs Watches, and I have a terrible confession to make, and it's definitely going to lose me popularity with some of you, but here it is. The reality is I hate vintage Rolex. We're going to talk about this in more detail. I'm definitely going to want your opinions. I expect there's going to be a bit of a controversy starting in the comments section, but before we get into the meat and potatoes of this argument, let's get the quick fist watch check out of the way. What do you think I'm wearing, guys? Here it is. Let's take a look. Is it old? Is it new? Is it borrowed? Is it blue? It's... Hey, before I show you the big reveal on the quick fist watch check, I just want to say I'm working really hard to try and be one of your favorite YouTube watch guys, so I will consider it a great honor if you would hit that subscribe button, like this video, talk to me in the comments. Let's do this together. I've got lots more to share. Come on with me on this journey. A Submariner ceramic modern edition, completely new-ish. Well, new to me. Okay guys, let's talk about new, old, modern, why I prefer the new stuff and why I just don't like the old. Here we have a Rolex 16613 Bluesy. Now the Pontiff has one of these and he loves it. And mind you, he's got gold through the buckle, whereas mine is stainless steel in the buckle. This is a 2000 model, which means that it has, it doesn't have tritium. It has luminova, super luminova, and therefore it's still, even though it's a 2000, we got a 19-year-old watch here, but it still has glow in its lume. And because this is a two-tone versus the steel version here, we have a gold crown, we have gold bezel, and we have gold center links. So even though this is a highly beautiful watch, and on some level it was better than this one because of the gold, why do I way prefer this one? All right, well, let's pick this apart. The first thing is, when I take off this steel one, this 2000 model, I'll put reference numbers for both of these watches in below. The center link here are, the links are all completely solid. So these are all solid metal, and this watch weighs in at 148 grams. Now she's beautiful, but there's a little bit of trickery, I feel, on the part of Rolex when we really begin to pick apart the components, because these gold center links are hollow. They are not plated, but this is actually a hollow center link of gold. And see if, my lighting might be, you know what? Give me a second. Let's adjust this light. Right here. See how that's hollow in there? That's the gold link, guys. That's the gold link. So this is, although it's a solid gold, it's not a solid link. It's actually a thin bit of link that is bent and curved around, whereas this is all solid. That is not, and this is true of every one of these gold links. And that is why, hang on, we're going to turn this light down a little bit. And that is why this watch weighs in at 133 grams. Well, this puppy weighs in at 148 grams, even though gold is heavier than steel. But this actually even has more steel on it. So the center links are one of the issues. But the other thing is, what you're having a look at here, Rolex, you should start putting AR coating on these sapphire crystals because I'm getting glare. But one of the things you can see is, although both of the watches are 40 millimeters in width, they are both the same in width. This is what we call the super case with maxi dial, and this is the old, the older case. Doesn't really have a name. They named this the super case and maxi dial, or actually that's what collectors named it. But one of the things that you can see is that it just gives a whole lot more. It just gives a whole lot more presence. The lugs are substantially wider, which gives the newer reference numbers, the 6-digit reference numbers, a whole lot more wrist presence. So hang on a second and let me put on this old bluesy, this 16613. Let's take a look at how it looks on the wrist. So here we have it. And allow me to put the new ceramic 6-digit reference on my other wrist. I'm going to pull a Fidel Castro here. But look at the difference. You know, that's a little loose. So hang on, I'm going to tighten it up or I'm going to get all kinds of comments. Mark, you like your watch is loose and sloppy, but this is ridiculous. Glide lock clasp, guys. Quick adjustments on the fly. And that's one of the things that we need to talk about when talking about. Look at the difference. I mean, I'm holding my wrists together and boy, this guy here is just presenting a whole lot more watch. I want to talk with my hands, but you know, it's hard to do. It's just presenting an entirely larger watch, although it's all done with trickery and Swiss engineering because this is a 40mm watch and this is a 40mm watch. But I'm one of these guys, I really like wrist presence. In fact, this is what I wore today. This is the 43mm Sea Dweller Redline 50th Anniversary Edition, and it's 43mm. I mean, this thing is a chunk. Actually, hang on, I'll put it on, and I will show you the difference between that and the modern ceramic Submariner, just for size differentiation. So here's the Sub, here's the Sea Dweller, and you can see quite a bit of difference there. Okay, so what are the other differences that I think are really important that make me a little bit disillusioned now with the older stuff? Well, we talked about the hollow center links versus the solid center links here. Another thing that really bugs me about these center links being hollow is that they stretch. Okay, now this is the gold one, and gold is a little stretchier and softer than stainless steel, as you know. But the old steel Submariners also had hollow center links, and those stretched as well. So over time, these bracelets just began to become saggy and stretchy. Now, here's another problem that I have with these vintage watches, and this completely ruins the experience for me now. These clasps are made out of pressed metal, and they're like stamped tin, very thin and very tinny. They are secure, they do work, they're like good enough. They're not good, they're like good enough. And they do have micro adjustments, as you can see here. So, you know, it's easy enough with a toothpick, you know, but really, in my estimation, you should not be sticking a toothpick or a paperclip into a Rolex to adjust it. I want the modern stuff. Now, we're going to talk about this watch a little bit more detail after a bit, because although it is not my cup of tea, it is beautiful, and it is for sale. Full set, box and papers. I just think it should go to somebody who loves vintage, and that's not me. So remember, I just showed you that tinny stamped metal clasp? Well, let's take off this Submariner. It feels weird. It's on my right hand. Are any of you right-handed but wear a watch on the right hand anyway? I don't. Who are you people? How can you do it? To me, it just feels oogie. This is the wrist for me. Okay, so first, the clasp. These are now milled out, and you could see much thicker material, and then the closing bit is no longer stamped or pressed metal. This is machined or milled steel, and this bit is much thicker. And now we have little ball bearings, you can see it right there, which assist the closure. So you get a click, I'll put it here, and another click, because there's the microphone, guys. So it's a much more secure feeling clasp, way heavier duty, and that accounts in part for the weight difference between this watch and the older version. The other thing is there are no micro adjustments on the side, because for the Submariner, Rolex engineered the glide lock clasp, which is a thing of beauty. Simply pull down here. You heard that click, and now we can move in and out, and there's a bunch of ratchets in there under where my thumb is. and we can make the bracelet smaller or larger, and then just click it back into position. And this means we can make adjustments in size on the fly. So it sure beats carrying a toothpick around, you know, or you're at a restaurant, you know, you're someplace warm and now your wrist is swelling up. And so you've got to take the watch off, put a toothpick in there, move the little spring bar over. And if you've ever done this, you hope like hell it doesn't like pop on you, because then you're on your hands and knees in some restaurant in Thailand looking for your little spring bar. Don't ask me how I know this. Yes, this is the kind of stuff that happens. Okay, so that's another issue. That's yet another reason that I prefer the new versus the old. And here is another reason: the bezels. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is an aluminum bezel. It's blue, and it is just, look at this watch. I mean, you know what? Honestly, if I loved vintage, which I kind of evolved out of that. I used to, or I wouldn't have bought this. But if I loved vintage, that bezel is just gorgeous. It is blue with 18 karat gold lettering. So it's really beautiful. Now, I'm very super careful with this watch, and this is in primo condition. I'll put sales details for this watch in the description. But it's in primo condition. But you have to be careful with these, because if you rub it up against anything, you can etch a scratch right into the aluminum bezel. Those are, I don't want to say they're delicate, but they're far from scratch resistant anyway. Now, the concept was, when you got your watch serviced, it was no big deal. Rolex would just pop that part out and pop in a brand new one. But of course, vintage people like original condition, and we've gotten to the point now where we don't really want our vintage stuff polished with replacement parts. So that means you might wander around with a beat up bezel. This one's cherry, okay? This is virginal. This girl has never gone to the prom. But you have to be so careful with these bezels. So I'm very careful, and I rarely wear this, and that would be the reason why. Here, Rolex replaced the aluminum bezel with ceramic, and this stuff, they call it Cerachrome, but that's just Rolex speak for some form of ceramic. And I'll tell you what, this stuff is very, very, very hard. Very hard. So I've never heard of anybody scratching it. I mean, if your wife takes her diamond ring, you know, maybe she could etch it. But it is highly unlikely to ever scratch. You know, people constantly say if you drop it, that it could shatter because it's hard but brittle. Could they replace it? Yes. It will certainly be more expensive to replace a broken ceramic bezel than a scratched up aluminum bezel. But as a practical matter, I've never really heard of anybody breaking their ceramic bezel. I'm sure it happens in the great wide world of Rolex, but I've never really actually even heard of it. So if you know anything about that, please tell me about it in the comments. And finally, really the last thing that I want to talk about is lume. I'm not going to be able to show you under these lights, but clearly if you have an old, really old vintage tritium, its lume is dead. If you have old super luminova, it'll have some lume left, but oh boy, the chromalite, the blue chromalite. I'll tell you what, at the end of this video, I'll drop in a picture of each of these so that you can compare the lume on the two of them. But trust me, this one's better for lume. Now, the Pontiff is right. Archie Luxury is right about a whole lot of things that you might not give him credit for. Remember, he's been 10 years on YouTube. He's the godfather of us all. And what he says is, when you go to sell a watch, that crazy people come out of the woodwork. And if you are a crazy person, let me alone. I'm not going to negotiate. I'm going to put sales details for this watch. You know, Archie's right. And every time I list something for sale, I have to deal with a lot of maniacs. Last guy I talked to, he wanted to pay me some way weird. Then he couldn't decide if I was going to send it to one of 3 countries. So, no. Anyway, if you're crazy, leave me alone, but there will be sales details. This is a full kit. It's a thing of beauty. It should go to somebody who loves it. Look, guys, let me just wrap it up like this. Vintage Rolex, modern Rolex, everybody has their thing. I've started with kind of the older vintage look in Rolex, and I have gravitated to preferring the new stuff. Once again, here is my 43 millimeter Sea Dweller held up against my 40 millimeter sub. Look how much bigger it is. I just, you know, I guess size matters. And when we get into the older stuff, it is more elegant, it is more delicate, it is more artistic, and that's my style, is big and brawny. So if you have a smaller wrist, see, I've got 7¼ inch wrists. And so I can and a flat wrist bone, so I can support a bigger watch. But if you have smaller, more delicate wrists, or if your sensibilities for watches are more refined, and you just like the long, beautiful, sinuous lugs on these old Rolexes, then you are a vintage guy. I myself am not. How about you? Tell me in the comments, what do you prefer, the old stuff or the new stuff, and why? I really am working hard to be one of your favorite YouTube gurus, so please like and subscribe. I've got lots more stuff that I want to share with you. Let's please do this again. Goldberg. Peace out.